Chapter 1. The Fluffy Frog in the Sky. A rocky plain, barren and dull. Nothing but grey as far as the eye could see. And then a flash of blue. And another. And the blue was there, solid, part of the landscape, as though it had always been. The watcher felt no surprise, but he moved closer to the strange, tall box anyway. Fitz kept shutting his eyes, clicking his heels together, yelling, "There's no place like home," and opening his eyes again with a big, happy-sounding sigh. This was one of the more irritating things he'd been doing since they'd stepped into this amazing magic wardrobe the Doctor called his TARDIS, ranking just above the endless tales about how they used to fly around the universe in a stroppy redhead. Anji so wasn't going to go there. And Fitz seemed completely unconcerned that they were not, as the Doctor had promised, back in Soho. At least not if the image on the closed-circuit TV thingy was to be trusted. The Doctor seemed unperturbed too, blithely swanning off deeper into the TARDIS to fetch something, despite having quite obviously and definitely broken his promise to take Anji home. But then he'd also promised her he wouldn't let her boyfriend Dave die. Don't think about that. "Sand and rock," she muttered. "There's no sand in Soho, and even less rock." "Rock music," said Fitz. She ignored him. "Like I said, we might be in Soho, just not the Soho of your day. Or that could be alien sand," he continued cheerfully. "We might not even be on Earth at all." The inner door opened, and the Doctor swept through the console room, pulled a large red lever on the way, and was out of the still-opening TARDIS doors in a dash of bottle green. "I'm just going to collect some samples," his voice filtered back. "Find out where we are." "Can he do that?" Anji asked. "Find out what planet we're on by looking at bits of rock?" "The Doctor," Fitz said, "can do anything." But she noticed he had his fingers crossed. "Come on, let's see what it's like out there." "Let me just get my jacket," said Anji. Fitz gave her a look. Well, it was all right for him. He was wearing his overcoat. Who knew what alien weather was going to be like? She nipped back to what she was alarmed to realize she was already thinking of as her room, and picked up the blazer she'd left lying on the bed. Her bed. She glanced round the room. Lucky she liked minimalism. Lucky she didn't have any sort of phobia about circles. Fitz was still waiting for her when she got back to the console room, and they both followed the Doctor's path through the doors. To Anji's surprise, it was pleasantly warm outside. Just right, in fact, even though there was a bit of a breeze. The sky was almost clear. There was only one biggish cloud, which looked, to her still rather dazed mind, like a giant fluffy white frog, and the sun was nearing its apex. The sun was, just possibly, perhaps, maybe the tiniest fraction smaller than she was used to. But it might not be. She'd never spent a great deal of time solar gazing, because of the scare stories about losing one's vision, and also because, well, what on earth would have been the point? So, it could be somewhere other than 20th century Earth, or it could just be her memory playing tricks, trying to persuade her she was seeing something unusual. She took a deep breath. It certainly smelled like Earth, although, and this was odd, for some reason she couldn't quite put her finger on, it reminded her of London more than any wide open space, which wasn't quite right. But it wasn't London, obviously, because there were no people, no noise, not even a pigeon. Just a big blue box. She shook her head, her mind still rebelling at the idea of this museum piece being a space-time machine. Or perhaps it was her sense of style objecting to a space-time machine looking like a museum piece. Really, the TARDIS, seen from the outside, looked absolutely ridiculous. A 1960s British or just English, goodness knows, police box, from the days before police radios or mobile phones. Interesting thought. Did the advent of mobile phones help catch more criminals, or help more criminals evade capture? Would her mobile phone work in space, or wherever? Presumably not. But what if she were in the future? Phone networks might still be around. Might as well try it, just to see. Anji opened her bag and fished for the slim black phone. No network. Surprise, surprise. So they were in the past, or on an alien planet, or, just possibly, in Wales. Fitz wandered over. "Ah, a mobile phone," he said, in the manner of someone being particularly clever. "I used one of those once, you know." "I'm impressed," said Anji, deciding to save the demonstration of her Scion organizer for another day. "Look, do you know where we are yet? And while I'm on the subject, why exactly does this ultra-fantastic alien space and time ship look like that? Isn't it a bit embarrassing?" "The Doctor," said Fitz, "is supremely self-confident and unconcerned with superficial appearances." She sighed, irritated. "That doesn't explain anything. Well, it probably does explain some things, but not what I was asking." Fitz glanced over to where the Doctor was kneeling on the ground, happily scooping up earth into a small plastic tube. "Because he," gesturing over there, "once landed it on Earth back in my time, before my time if you get me, and the gizmo that used to make it change so it looked like something people wouldn't notice got stuck. Like it should be a rock or something now. But he likes it like this." Anji looked at the guy who likes it like this. She had the distinct impression that he was pretending not to be listening to Fitz, trying not to let Fitz know that this was all news to him too, maybe wondering exactly why he liked his spaceship looking like a mid-20th century relic. A bit worrying. She shivered. "What is it?" "Nothing," she answered automatically, then reconsidered. There was something else. "I think we're being watched." "That," Fitz informed her, "is because you're not used to being out of your own time frame. It's a perfectly natural phenomenon." Patronizing git. Anji considered it was to her great credit that she didn't say, "I told you so," when the caveman appeared. After you've seen aliens kill your boyfriend and been in a spaceship that's bigger on the inside than the outside, bumping into something that you've at least seen in books, movies, ancient American cartoons isn't as scary as all that. It looked somewhat cartoon-like too. Exaggerated jaw and forehead, hunched back and muscles and a lot of hair, and, unbelievably, dressed in what appeared to be leopard skin rags. It was glaring at them, but making no move to approach. Apart from the leopard skin, and its willingness to keep at a distance, it reminded Anji irresistibly of an ex-boyfriend. Tom, the one who was, 1, 2, 3 before Dave. Don't think about Dave. The Doctor had leapt up off the ground and darted back to Anji and Fitz. "Don't make any sudden moves," he said ridiculously. "It's probably far more scared of us." "I'm not scared at all," Anji informed him. "It's not threatening us." The Doctor frowned and told her that it was perfectly reasonable, even sensible, to be scared of things until you knew exactly what was going on. Boy, was he so obviously a proponent of "do what I say, not what I do." The caveman began to move cautiously towards them, grunting inquisitively. Anji stood her ground, turning to Fitz and the Doctor to see what they were making of this. None of it seemed real to her. Fitz raised an eyebrow and smiled smugly. "Just leave this to me. One look at this." He took a lighter from his jacket pocket, "and he'll be worshipping us as gods." Then the stupid prat flicked up the flame and started walking towards the caveman. Was that PC? Cave person? Evolutionarily challenged, perhaps? Going, "Ugh, ugh, 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 for goodness sake." Anji raised her eyes heavenwards. And then kept them there. Hang on a minute. No, it was her imagination. It had to be her imagination, but there was the giant fluffy frog in the sky, in exactly the same place. Surely it was imagination, coincidence, whatever, because whatever weirdo world this was, and however light the breeze, surely the clouds had to move? Her attention was ripped back to Earth as the caveman suddenly screamed. It sounded like a shrieking chimpanzee. But it didn't sound like fear, more like, "Oh, help!" It started charging towards them. The idiot, meaning Fitz, had obviously enraged the creature. "Ah!" yelled Fitz, and dropped the lighter. "Run!" cried the doctor. They ran. To Angie's horrified realization, they were running away from the TARDIS. She breathlessly commented on this, once again admiring her own restraint. Fitz tapped his nose as he ran. "If we'd gone," gasp, "back to the TARDIS," gasp, "the doctor'd never know," gasp, "where we were," big gasp, "and that's not," gasp, "how it works." "But we know where we are. This is obviously prehistoric Earth." Anji was having enough problems trying to keep up with the doctor and Fitz, who were both much taller than she was and weren't wearing heels. The doctor slowed down momentarily to take her hand and motioned for Fitz to do the same on her other side. Between them, they dragged Anji on, making her feel like a piece of meat. The doctor spoke for the first time. Anji had the feeling that he had been too busy taking everything in himself up till now to comment on it to them. "Not necessarily," he said. Anji had almost forgotten what they were talking about, and was sickened to note, as she panted away, that the doctor was not even the slightest bit winded by their speed. It could be a parallel evolution on another planet. Or a parallel, gasp, Earth, added Fitz, who still seemed to be on his "I know more about space-time travel than you do" kick. "That can happen. If it were night-time, the doctor could tell exactly where we are just by looking at the stars." The doctor shot Fitz an amazed glance. "It's not night-time, though," Anji said. The doctor looked relieved. "And I think there's something wrong with the sky." "What the hell's that?" With a horrific screeching noise, an enormous leathery creature glided down from a rocky outcrop. Bigger than an eagle, than two eagles, and with the ugliest long pointed mouth thing, not exactly a beak, and with hundreds of tiny pointed teeth. "It's a pterodactyl," said the doctor helpfully. "I know that, but they weren't around with cavemen," Anji said, trying to concentrate on keeping her footing and not pulling all three of them over. Without turning round, she could hear the grunts that told her the caveman was still behind them, not distracted by the huge flying reptile. "So it could be a parallel Earth, then." The doctor sounded quite excited. "And a giant dinosaur bird thing's less ferocious on parallel Earths in general. Is it likely to attack us?" "No idea." He still sounded as if he was having a great time. "But just in case, keep oof, oof," echoed Anji and Fitz, unable to separate in time. All three sprawled on the ground. "What was that?" yelled Fitz, obviously forgetting that he knew everything. Anji clambered off Fitz, whose expression was alternating between fear and, "Hey, there's a woman on top of me," and narrowed her eyes, peering ahead. Sand, rock, thin air. For the life of her, she couldn't see what they'd banged into. The doctor put a hand tentatively forward. The air around it shimmered like a heat haze. "Energy barrier," he announced. "Here comes the caveman," Fitz shouted. "And he's got a club from somewhere. Use your sonic screwdriver, Doctor." "What for?" "To disable the barrier." "How?" I don't know." Fitz seemed a bit stressed. "You're the genius." The doctor had brought his screwdriver thing out of his pocket and was staring at it. The caveman was slow and lumbering. They could probably dodge it for a while, but unless they got back to the TARDIS, there was nowhere really to hide. The pterodactyl was swooping around, interestingly avoiding the barrier. The caveman had stopped too, but lurked menacingly a short distance away. Perhaps they could sense the barrier. But the doctor, Fitz, and Anji couldn't. And if they kept bumping into invisible barriers, and the caveman and the flying dinosaur got over their wariness, the Doctor had to get them through it. "I've seen you use your sonic screwdriver before," Anji said, trying to sound encouraging. "You just seem to know what to do without thinking about it." "Yes," the Doctor beamed. "Good point. If I don't think about trying to use it and concentrate on something else instead, that pterodactyl, for example, it's not actually a dinosaur or a bird, did you know that? And interestingly, no one's worked out how they managed to take off from ground level. I wonder if it will land so we can find out. Also," he was pointing the sonic screwdriver at the barrier, but looking at Anji, "they probably ate fish and carrion, so we should be in no danger." "Oh, really?" said Anji, remaining unconvinced as she watched the reptiles swooping around. She made encouraging noises as the Doctor waved the sonic screwdriver around behind his back. "And they could have a wingspan of 15 or so meters. This one's just a baby," the Doctor continued. Anji wondered if she was supposed to be grateful for that. Fitz gave a sudden whoop. "That's it," he cried. There was a swirling, shimmering hole appearing in front of them, a sort of air whirlpool, pale blue and the size of a dinner plate, a car tire, a car door. Incredible. Fitz was on his feet and through it in an instant. It looked like he'd walked into a cloud. "Fitz?" Anji called, alarmed. "Did he always jump into things without thinking first?" There was a whistle of astonishment from the other side of the barrier, and then she heard Fitz's voice. "I'm okay," he was saying. "Come on." A hand appeared through the swirling blue and made beckoning gestures at them. Anji turned to congratulate the Doctor. "You did it," she said. "I did?" he beamed, looking fondly down on the sonic screwdriver. "Now, let's join Fitz before Mr. Neanderthal catches up with us." He spun round to face the hole he'd created. "Fitz, we're coming through now." The hand made a thumbs-up sign and retreated. "Hurry up!" Fitz's voice drifted back. "You won't believe what's through here. It's... ah!" And that was all. Anji jumped instinctively towards the cry, but the Doctor was at the barrier first, just as the hole zipped into nothingness. "Don't worry," the Doctor cried, brandishing the sonic screwdriver again. "If I can just distract myself for a few more minutes, and you run around a bit and confuse the caveman and the pterosaur just in case. Don't worry, Fitz, we're coming." But as Anji turned from the barrier, she saw that the caveman and the pterodactyl had gone. And she didn't think she and the Doctor were going to be joining Fitz, wherever he was, any time soon. In front of her, there was she was ashamed to admit that the only term her mind was coming up with was scary robot with gun. Doctor, she said, backing off as far as she dared with an invisible barrier behind her, threatening to knock her to the ground. "Just a moment," he said, not turning. The scary robot took a clunking step closer. It was so tall, and now so close, that Anji had to angle her head back to look at its blank golden face. "Doctor," she said again. He turned then. "Ah, good distraction, Anji," he said. "Unauthorized presence in this zone," said the scary robot. Its voice was deep and masculine, and surprisingly human. "Unauthorized breach of zone barrier. You will come with me." It gestured with its gun, futuristic space gun, Anji's mind said, and repeated, "You will come with me." "Doctor," said Anji, nervously. "Oh, we'd better go with it," the Doctor said with a sigh. "These sort of things get angry and start shooting if you don't do what they say. By the way, I've decided that we're probably not on a parallel Earth after all." Anji said nothing. As they were led off at gunpoint by the golden robot, the Doctor turned to her and whispered, "You know, wherever we are, I'm glad we came. I'm starting to feel really at home." To Cybertron at xprof.net. From Anji Kapoor at mwfutures.co.uk. Date 14th of the 2nd 01, 11:03. Subject Tyrannorific. Dear Dave, I'm on another planet in what's apparently the far future. You'd like it here? There are robots that look a bit like the Terminator, but in gold. I travelled in a police box that's bigger on the inside than the outside, with a wild-eyed amnesiac and a man who's about 5 years older than me, but was born before my parents were. But you met them, of course, though you didn't know then what they were. I wish I'd never met them. I wish I didn't know what they were. I wish I were back in London C21st with you. I wonder if I can go back in time and stop us meeting them. Would that work? You'd know. You watch that sort of rubbish. Rubbish IMO, of course. Let's not get into that row now. Incidentally, you know that time we went to the Natural History Museum when they had that display of moving dinosaurs? They didn't seem that scary, did they? Wrong. Dinosaurs equal terrifying. Oh, and I've just been arrested. Love, Anji. Cross, cross, cross. Send now / send later. Send later. It had been a long walk to the edge of the prehistoric landscape. The doctor had taken her hand at the start, no doubt to reassure her, but now there was no sense of urgency. She'd instinctively shaken it off. She'd felt guilty afterwards, although the doctor didn't seem to have minded. Then, after a while, when the realities of this horrific situation began to really sink in, Anji wished she'd held on to him tight. She couldn't summon up the courage to initiate the contact herself, though. What might he think? Anji hadn't spotted the TARDIS on their way across the plain, though she had caught sight of a few more cavemen in the distance, and, terrifyingly, what looked like an allosaur. None of them had come anywhere near the two travellers or their guard, however, or even seemed to notice them. Perhaps they were used to scary robots? Or perhaps they'd been trained to stay away from them, or were wary somehow, just as the pterodactyl and the caveman had seemed to want to avoid the energy barrier. The doctor had tried to escape a few times, yelling, "Look, over there!" to the scary robot, or sticking out a foot to trip it up. The doctor had limped for a while after that, but none of it had worked. On one bizarre occasion he had shouted, "Anji, quick, number 17!" and had then looked utterly confused. She hadn't asked him what he meant. She was too busy being scared. What was this thing going to do with them? Where was it taking them? And, as a general addition to that, where were they anyway? The TARDIS could travel anywhere in space and time. They could therefore be anywhere at all, at any time. She hadn't really had a chance to think about that up till now. It had all seemed so unreal still while they were actually in the TARDIS. She'd still been shell-shocked over her boyfriend's death. A bit inside her gave an ironic laugh. How was this for a distraction from the grieving process? And the bits of her mind that were available for getting a grip on her new situation were taken up with trying to ignore the increasingly irritating Fitz, who was not someone she'd have chosen to travel around the universe with. Then she felt guilty about having felt that because Fitz, for all she knew, could be dead now. For a few moments, in the far distant past that was her time in the TARDIS, she'd wondered how they'd cope living together, just the three of them. She'd been in shared student houses with people she'd not got on with, but there'd always been the option of escape, to college, bars, other friends' houses. Now she couldn't very well stay in her room with a good book while the others went out exploring the universe, could she? Could she? Perhaps she'd suggest that next time, if there was a next time. You go and face the scary robots and dinosaurs, Fitz. I just want to finish Sense and Sensibility. Better be boring than die. She didn't want to die. She was travelling with the guy with the time machine, and she knew because Dave had been into that sort of stuff that made her one of the main characters. Fitz, too, so no more worrying about him either. Name near the top of the credits, tied up and gloated at by villains, but never killed by them. You knew you were always going to make it to the end of the story, except that one time in 100,000 where even so you only ever died in a grand, heroic, tragic blaze of final episode glory, and this wasn't one. so she shouldn't be this scared. But would anyone else realize this? Would the real universe play by those fictional rules? Should she get a t-shirt printed with, "I'm a main character, don't kill me"? Would that help? And then she'd thought, as she kept doing, however much she tried to stop it, of Dave. Dave, whose life's ambition had been to be a main character, and yet who, even at the end, hadn't managed to progress beyond incidental. He hadn't even made it to guest star, one story only. Let's face it, he hadn't stood a chance. Anji had shot a discreet sideways glance at the doctor at that point. He must have seen a lot of deaths. After a while, it must really do your head in. Perhaps that was why he had lost his memory, couldn't cope with it anymore. She shivered. Distraction. Her feet. No time for grief. Concentrate on the pain of each step. Try to count the blisters you know have developed already. Just think about one step after another. And then she decided that right here and now, she'd almost prefer to use grief to distract herself from the pain of her feet. Need a different distraction. Anywhere in time and space. Was that likely to be true? She'd travelled in space with the doctor, excluding the possibility that the whole thing was a drug-induced fantasy. The space travel bit at least had definitely happened. But, well, they'd just gone up to a bog-standard bit of space near Earth. Perhaps the TARDIS could just shoot off into orbit really, really quickly, or she'd suffered some strange time dilation effect from the speed. Ha! Velocity, not drugs. Again, discounting phantasms or figments of the imagination, however they were formed, she knew that aliens existed. After all, she'd not only met some, she'd pretty much killed a whole race of them. Slight exaggeration for dramatic effect. Aliens existed, and they had wanted to invade Earth. Therefore, they didn't come from Earth. Therefore, there were inhabited planets other than Earth. So far, making sense. Well, logic, possibly not sense. Technology therefore existed that was capable of transporting people from one inhabited world to another. So, it was possible that she was on another planet. However, just how far was parallel evolution likely? Would there be dinosaurs on another planet that looked just like those out of picture books? Would there be such stereotypical cavemen? And if dinosaurs and cavemen had survived, how had the civilization reached the level that enabled it to build energy barriers, holographic skies — that was what the doctor had guessed when she pointed out her frog — and robots with guns? Probable conclusion: they hadn't. Somehow, this was a fake. If the technology existed to build spaceships like the ones she'd seen, then it existed to build robots and guns and, to clone Neanderthals, that sort of thing. After all, they were talking about cloning dodos back home, and they'd already done some extinct cow or something, and that was just what the public were told about. So there was no reason at all to suppose she was on an alien planet in the far future, or distant past. The Doctor's ship may just have zapped back to another bit of Earth, say a developmental complex in America. Maybe she was in Area 51. And then she thought of how Dave would react if he found out that Area 51 was actually a prehistoric theme park, which took her mind into those places she didn't want to go again, and she forgot about trying to rationalize things away. In the end, they'd come to a part of the rocky plain that looked just like the rest of the rocky plain, but there the golden robot had finally stopped. Anji resisted the huge temptation to take her shoes off and air her blisters, because she knew that she'd never be able to put them back on again, and presumably there was still more walking ahead of them. There was an electronic hum from the robot's head, and suddenly Anji could see the barrier just a couple of feet in front of them, nothing like before with the sonic screwdriver. This was more like a sheet of rippling water that had suddenly become suspended somehow in the air. Rocky plain with added water feature. Tasteful. The robot had begun to move forward again, shepherding the Doctor and Anji in front of it. The Doctor had smiled encouragingly at her and stepped through the watery wall without hesitation. Screwing up her courage, she didn't know what was on the other side after all. Anji had followed. It wasn't like she'd imagined. She'd expected to step straight through to the other side, but there didn't seem to be another side. It was, she wasn't sure what it was like, sort of a cross between walking against the wind and forcing herself through a waterfall. The barrier pressed down on her, and she couldn't see anything but bright, shimmering water stuff ahead. For an instant, a dart of claustrophobia stabbed through her, and she almost screamed. Then, as if sensing her panic, a hand came back through the translucence and unerringly found hers. A fraction of a second of further panic, and then she saw the distinctive blue gemstone ring on one of the fingers and recognized it as the Doctor's. Calmer, she let him lead her forward. In the end, Anji had no idea how long it took them to walk through the barrier, though she suspected it was really only a few seconds, probably not much longer than it took her to get her breath back once she was out. But out where? There was no rocky plain on the other side. Whatever Anji might have expected, not that she really had any clear ideas, she had at least thought that the plain would continue. That they'd seem to be on the same planet in the same world, perhaps with a few "Do not enter, trespassers will be prosecuted" signs stuck up. Instead, they were somewhere else. No longer prehistoric, she could see a city in the distance. And when she turned to look behind her, the barrier had gone, and the industrial landscape carried on as far as she could see. They were also surrounded by armed men. Human men. Was it Area 51? Or something worse? "Have we transmatted or something?" she had gasped at the Doctor, worried. No, he had said. "Remember, Fitz? We're on the other side of the barrier. It's just that this barrier was quite a substantial one. Hello there." The last had been said to the guards around them. She just knew they were guards. For a start, they were in uniform, one-piece purple and silver outfits. And she knew uniformed men surrounding you with hard expressions and raised guns just had to be guards, in the same way she knew that the beautiful female alien would definitely fall in love with Captain Kirk. The guards had led the Doctor and Anji to a black box-looking car thing, and the Doctor had kept smiling reassuringly at Anji, and she noticed with some surprise that she still had hold of his hand. The Doctor had asked the guards where they were, who they, the guards, were, what planet they were on, whether they were being arrested for something and if so what, and where they were being taken. The guards had accused the Doctor and Anji of being terrorists, but wouldn't say what they were supposed to have been terrorizing or answer any of the Doctor's other questions. They just waved their guns and forced the two into the car. Two of the guards got in, too, and continued ignoring the Doctor's queries. The car started off, but the windows were blacked out, so Anji had no idea where they were heading. She assumed the distant city. The Doctor, finally letting go of her hand, had tried to open one of the doors with his sonic screwdriver, but it hadn't worked. They'd sat more or less in silence for the whole journey. Anji had wanted to ask more questions, but wasn't sure if she was ready just yet for the answers. And anyway, she was just so relieved to be off her blistered feet that they could be taking her more or less anywhere, and she wouldn't care. Upon arrival, the guards had marched them out of the car, and Anji barely had time to see they were outside a large, dirty white building before they were bundled inside, herded down a few fairly grotty carpeted corridors. Would anywhere but Earth have carpet? And then, to her horror, the Doctor had been led one way, and she another. "Doctor!" she'd called after him, Totally anguished, her only anchor in this sea of madness suddenly swept away, and he had called back that everything would be all right, he'd see her soon. But how did he know? And now she was sitting in a bare white room, sitting on an uncomfortable plastic chair with a desk lamp pointed at her face, although it wasn't switched on, so she was able to see clearly the two purple uniformed men pacing up and down in front of her, firing out questions. They kept saying she was a terrorist and asking for details of her organization, and looked incredulous when she tried denying it. They also kept telling her she was Anji, which confused her. She'd assumed they'd worked it out from the gold name necklace she was wearing, but every time she agreed with them, they'd shouted at her some more. But the shouting was actually a good thing. She'd been scared, pushed along, threatened with guns. She was close to tears. But unreasoned shouting, that she could deal with, because it was something she didn't take from anyone. In a strange way, it made her feel stronger, because however scary they were, she'd always been told that bullies were cowards. She'd had to deal with bullies many, many times, and she knew she could do it. The more they shouted, the more she was able to stand up to them, and the further from breaking down she became. "I'm not a terrorist. Do I look like a terrorist? Yes, all right, I don't know what a terrorist is supposed to look like. Balaclavas and camouflage jackets, I suppose, that sort of thing. But you can see that isn't me." "No, I said balaclavas. They're a sort of knitted head covering thing. I suppose it should give me confidence to know that I'm in a civilization that doesn't have them. They'd suit you, though." One of the men grabbed her necklace and tore it from her neck, breaking the fragile chain. Anji yelped, and the personal violation of taking something so precious from her made her really snap. She had leapt to her feet. Ouch, her feet! Pushing the chair back, and half shouted, half screamed, "Give that back, now!" The guards had leapt to their feet too, and their guns were now pointing straight at her. She made an effort to calm down, explained things rationally. "It was a present from my boyfriend, the last present he ever gave me. It was for no more sinister purpose than to celebrate our anniversary. Our last ever anniversary. I would appreciate you giving it back." They didn't. They didn't seem to understand. Or care. "I don't know what you think it signifies, but it's just my name. Anji, it's my name. It was a custom where I come from to have necklaces with your name on." They kept staring. Ridiculously, she explained further. "Well, safety groups didn't advise it because they said strange men could read your name and pretend they know you, but as I'm not 6 years old and I can look after myself, look, will you just give it back, please?" The men wouldn't. They seemed to have got it into their heads that her necklace proved her to be a terrorist. She was getting very frustrated now. "It's just a necklace. It's clearly not a terrorist badge. Look, where's the doctor? He'll tell you you've got the wrong idea. The doctor, the man who was with me, tall white guy, brown curls, green coat. He's hardly forgettable. No, not the other terrorist. Honestly, are you listening to me at all? It's quite ridiculous to say, if you won't answer our questions. I am quite clearly answering your questions to the very best of my ability, but they seem to bear no relation to reality. What you mean is that I won't give you the answers that you're after. Well, I can't. I don't know what you want me to say, and even if I did, I wouldn't say it unless it were true. Now, would you please give me back my necklace?" But they still wouldn't. "Oh, this is ridiculous. Why on earth is my necklace so important?" The men gaped at her for a second. Then the questions started again, slightly quieter, and with a puzzled edge. Anji was puzzled too. "Yes, I said Earth. Why? I'm beginning to figure out I'm not where I hoped I was. Yes, why on Earth? It's just an expression where I come from. It's not a big deal, is it? Look, can I see the doctor now?" The men looked at each other. One of them nodded. At that, Anji's inner bravado collapsed almost immediately in a huge surge of relief. She tried not to show that as they led her out of the room, down the carpeted corridors, twisting and turning, and finally reaching a solid metal door with a keypad lock, which they activated. But after the door had slammed, shutting her in a cell with the doctor, she collapsed to the floor. The doctor's voice was saying, "Hello, Anji," from somewhere above her, and Anji sat up, clasping her knees. "Hi," she said. "Sorry about that." The doctor smiled at her. "I'm very glad you're all right." He gestured behind him, and Anji realized they weren't alone. "Everyone, this is Anji." 3 teenage boys, probably about 17 or 18, were sitting on one of the plastic bunks that lined the walls of the small, plain, white room. The doctor introduced them as Zernik, who gave her a shy wave, Zequathon, who grinned, and Beezy, who raised an eyebrow at her. "They're all terrorists," beamed the doctor. All 3 boys wore dull green jumpsuit outfits, zipped up the front and covered in pockets. Zernik had red hair and was just the tiniest bit chubby, and was blushing slightly as she looked at him. Anji felt drawn to him instantly and wanted to give him a hug. Zequathon she didn't want to hug. He was over 6 foot and looked a bit of a bruiser. He was a blonde. And Beezy, the 3rd boy, was dark-haired and skinny and seemed rather shifty. But none of them looked like terrorists to her. Though, as she'd said to the guards, she didn't know what terrorists were supposed to look like. She'd seen photos of clean-cut white boys and middle-aged Asian men smiling out of newspapers under headlines about bombings and threats and executions. You couldn't tell by appearances. "Those men kept shouting that I was a terrorist. They wouldn't listen to me," she said. "And it was very strange. They took my necklace. Not that it was valuable or anything, but, well, it was the last thing Dave gave me before, you know." She was quiet for a moment. The doctor nodded, showing her he understood. After a minute, she gave him a half smile and brushed away the single tear that had escaped. "Sorry," she murmured. He shook his head. No, don't be. But I think I can explain about the necklace. Beezy," he turned to the Weasley-looking dark-haired boy, "would you show Anji your badge, please?" The boy, called Beezy, unzipped the top couple of inches of his jumpsuit and pulled back his collar. There, on the inside, was a small round badge which read ANJI. The other 2 boys followed suit, flashing their collars. They were both wearing identical badges. "Meet your fan club," the doctor said, grinning. This was bloody incredible. Fitz would have said unbelievable if he hadn't already learned to believe 6 impossible things before breakfast, and another 20 before lunch. One second, he was running about on alien sand and watching strange bird dinosaur things wheeling in a strange sky. The next he had jumped through a hole to Egypt. Still lots of sand piled around, and the odd strange bird thing too. Ibises, were they? But it was all yellow and sunny, and there were all these pyramids. So either he'd just time-travelled without a TARDIS, or something else that he couldn't quite think of at the moment. Like, Fitz yelled in shock, maybe he wasn't in Egypt at all, but Universal Horrorland, because there was a huge great mummy walking down the street towards him, bandages dangling, arms stretched out towards Fitz, and maybe he'd be better off with the caveman and dinosaur after all, because at least they were natural, so he should go back with all speed. And in a moment that definitely belonged in a horror film, Fitz turned back and found that the hole through the barrier had vanished. He couldn't even see where it had been. There seemed to be nothing but yellow sand until the horizon. But he put out a hand and drew it back sharply as he felt the tingling of energy. No escape from the mummy that way. He was going to have to run, but it was almost on top of him, arms out to strangle him as mummies did. But the mummy lumbered straight past without a sideways glance. Not that it had any eyes, but, oh Christ, there was another one over there. And another. Oh, and there was a cat? That wasn't quite as scary. And a guy with a jackal's head? Freak show time. But no people. How the hell was he going to get back to the doctor now? And how was the doctor going to get away from the flying dinosaur and the caveman now his escape route was shut off? But then Fitz decided that the doctor was perfectly capable of dealing with such things. Of course he was. And so Fitz might as well keep all his concern for himself. Did he say there were no people? Well, no one except for that girl peering round that street corner sarcophagus. A girl with heavy eye makeup who was wearing one of those Nefertiti headdress things and looking straight at him. Hello? Called Fitz. The girl frowned and came out from behind the coffin. She was only about 13 or 14, but quite a looker anyway, and, slim, but, reasonably developed for her age, or so it would seem from a casual glance. "Are you lost?" she asked. Yes," said Fitz. "Very." "Thought so. You look like you're from the 20th century." Fitz gaped at her. "Would you like me to take you back there?" "You can do that?" "Well, yes, just don't tell anyone. Come on, this way." She scurried off. Fitz, dodging cats and ibises and apparent embodiments of ancient gods and goddesses, followed her. "Anji?" "Yes." No, not you, them. Apparently it stands for the Association for the New Jupitan Independence, supplied the blonde boy. A collective of right-minded people who want to see New Jupiter go forward in its own identity, not kowtowing to ridiculous ancient ties. He sounded as though he were quoting from something. "There, you see?" said the doctor, beaming at Anji. "Well, I'm all for own identities." New Jupiter. "I'm pretty sure there was only one Jupiter back where I came from," Anji said. "So this must be New Jupiter named after the first Jupiter, like New York or New Jersey, which means this is the future after all. Oh! Well, a bit of it," the doctor said. "There's actually rather a lot of it, you know, and tomorrow it'll be part of the past." "I mean, it's my future," said Anji. "If I were on Earth now, it would be later than AD 2001. One of the boys, BZ, spat on the ground. The doctor tutted benevolently. "That's rather unhygienic, you know." "You didn't mention you were Earth lovers," the boy sneered. "That's what I call unhygienic." The doctor gazed at him, frowning. "What a strange insult," he said. "Were you just copying what I said? Although I suppose you could call loving the Earth unhygienic. The oceans are terribly polluted for a start, and I don't suppose anyone's washed the ozone layer recently." Anji raised her eyes to the ceiling. "Shut up!" yelled Zequathon, the blonde boy. "Are you working for the president, trying to find out our plans?" The doctor made an elaborate zipping gesture across his mouth. "If you refuse to tell us, that means yes," said BZ coldly. The doctor raised his hands in the air, a pleading look in his eyes. Anji decided to intervene. "I think he means," she said, shaking her head. The doctor knew how to be irritating. "That he's shut up because you asked him to, and so can't answer any of your questions without unshutting up. Look, just tell him he can speak." "All right, speak," said Zequathon. "Answer me." The doctor unzipped his mouth. "I don't know who the president is, and even if I did, I doubt I'd be working for him. I didn't know about you until I was put in this cell. I didn't know you had any plans until you mentioned them, and unless you're going around blowing people up, I'm probably on your side anyway. Now, could you imagine that I'm telling the truth and we really don't know what's going on, any part of it, and tell us all about it? You don't have to talk about any of your plans," he added kindly. The boy paused for a second. He probably wasn't too bright, Anji thought. "Okay," he said at length. You tell the tale, Timothy." Anji couldn't help laughing at the look of anger and consternation Timothy shot him. "Beezy?" Zequathon, or maybe that wasn't his real name, corrected himself hurriedly. "I mean Beezy." Beezy, with another angry look, started to tell the tale. Well, some of us got fed up with always being told how Earth was so much better than New Jupiter. So when the president started coming up with plans for this park thing, we... "Just a minute," the doctor interrupted. "Could you go back a bit further than that? Who the president is and so on?" Beezy frowned but obliged. "The president's descended from the leader of the first colony way back years ago. John F. Hoover, his name is." "What does the F stand for?" asked the doctor, showing he was taking an interest, gaining their sympathy. He was leaning slightly forward too, palms upright and open. Anji had done a seminar on body language in the workplace and knew what he was up to. Mind you, radical thought, maybe the doctor was finding the story fascinating and really did want them to open up to him, trust him, be his friends. Whatever, the effort in appearing interested wasn't appreciated. Beezy gave the doctor a "you are dumb" look. "What are you talking about? It's the presidential F. It doesn't stand for anything." "Oh, I see," said the doctor, as if that made perfect sense. "Please, carry on." Beezy shrugged. "Well, he's just really into the whole Earth thing. Our ancestors came from Earth, therefore we're spiritually Earthmen. We're made to feel second class." "At least," interrupted Zequathon. More like 10th class," added Zernik, the first time Anji had heard him speak, "if there were only 9 classes." "Because of us happening to be born a few 100,000 light years away from our spiritual home." It's not as if he's even saying he's better than us, even though he's from one of the first families. That'd be more understandable, just that we're all inferior to some stupid faraway Earth types, who care about us so much they haven't lifted a finger to help their people here, now we've no money or trade. "Set now Hoover's got this amazing plan to save us all with Earth's help," said Zequathon. "I was coming to that." Beezy glared at him. "Yeah, Earth do stuff when there's something in it for them." He turned back to the doctor. "Hoover's got Earth heritage to set up one of their theme parks here. You know, imagine what it would have been like to live in Earth's golden times, all that stuff. Which I suppose is all well and good in that it'll bring in some cash, but..." "And it's a big but," put in Zernik. "Just like Zernik's," said Zequathon irreverently, earning himself a punch. "But it makes us yet another little profit-making enterprise for Earth Heritage, who are the biggest load of money-grubbing gold diggers around. It makes everyone go, 'Ooh, Earth is so great!' And it completely ignores the fact that we do actually have some new Jupiter heritage of our own. But we can't have a theme park about that. Oh no, we don't even have a poky little backstreet museum about our heritage." "And Anji?" asked Anji. "We want to be independent from Earth. We can't rely on them for anything, so deferring to them in everything is just holding us back. Why should they get our taxes when they don't provide us with anything in return?" "Ah, taxes," muttered the doctor in an aside to Anji. "The people of New Jupiter should be proud of their own planet, not forever spouting on about some distant ancestry." "And it's not just us who think that," said Zequathon. "There are even people in the government who support us." "Really?" said the doctor. "Who?" "Why should we tell you?" snapped Beezy, at the very same moment that Zernik said, "We don't actually know who, exactly." "Anyway," continued Beezy, "the fact is that we have support, and we're going to show the stupid Earthmen of New Jupiter that Anji means business. The New Jupitans aren't going to let Earth leech off them forever. We'll show 'em all." "When you get out of this cell, of course," the doctor reminded him kindly. "And when is that exactly? When will they let you out?" There was no answer. All 3 boys looked sheepishly at the ground, the ceiling, anywhere but at the doctor, Anji, or each other. Anji began to have a bit of a sick feeling in her stomach. The doctor was leaning even further forward. "Tell me," he said. It was redhead Zernick who answered, sounding nervous. Well, they don't. Let us out, that is. This is the condemned cell, didn't you know?" Anji shut her eyes. She was a main character. They couldn't execute her just because they didn't like her jewellery, could they? 2. Cybertron at xprof.net. From Anji Kapoor at nwfutures.co.uk. Date 14/2/01/1247. Subject: Teen Terrorists. "Hi, darling. Wow, what a morning. You'll never believe it. Some aliens are going to execute me because I have the same name as a terrorist organisation consisting of 3 teenage boys. How's that for bad luck? And ironically, the people who are going to kill me, led by a man named John F. Hoover, believe it or not, revere Earth, and so they think that I must hate it. Hate Earth? The place where I want to be more than anywhere else in the entire universe? Funny, the terrorist kids have all given themselves different names to distance themselves from the culture they were brought up in. Did I ever tell you, when I first started school, I tried to pretend my name was Angela so I'd fit in? They're trying to fit out. If they were even the slightest bit efficient, I might be jealous of their integrity. Oh, my feet hurt. A lot. Anyway, must go. Bit busy, ATM. Love, Anji, XXX. Send now/send later. Send later.